Arcade conversions on home computers was an unfortunately lucrative business in the 80s. And I say unfortunately because most times these resulted in quite questionable titles to appear on otherwise respectable computers. For example, the awful Double Dragon port on Commodore 64. I never liked Double Dragon either, but it's not a bad game, at least. I mean, honestly, my favorite is probably Turn Around! Or the quite infamous Amstrad CPC version of Outrun. So the problem was not that these computers could not reproduce good quality arcade ports. I mean, they couldn't, but they could have good quality arcade ports, case in point Buggy Boy. But most of the times, these ports were quick and shallow titles that played terribly regardless of their faithfulness to the source material. But what if an already bad arcade title was somehow slightly improved by its home computer port? Well, let me introduce to you Hunchback at the Olympics. So I guess we have to talk about who Hunchback is. Well, the character of the green-clad hunchover guy debuted in the arcades in 1983 with a single-screen arcade title which was not bad and was ported on most computers at the time with, I think, a fair success. That success would earn him a sequel right the following year in Hunchback 2, Quasimodo's Revenge. No, that's one great title. What was next for our little hero in 1985? Well, apparently he wanted to participate in the Olympics, I guess. So the Olympics were taking place in Los Angeles in 1984, and Century Electronics, which already made the previous games, must have jumped, or double jumped, at the occasion, and sure enough, Hunchback is competing at the Olympics. Definitely a case of an appropriate title for the experience. The original arcade coin-op was pretty basic and straightforward, your average clone of track and field. Destroy your hands and the joystick to get your little guy moving, try to win the events to impress Esmeralda. Now, I don't know exactly where the impress part came into play in the arcade title, because this seems like a straightforward collection of boring events which just loops after the few events present are over. So it's basically just 5 minutes gameplay and then you're already looped at the beginning with no screen, no big reward, nor anything. I would guess you would have to complete it 100 times to see the real ending, but my guess is there's no end screen whatsoever. There are also no additional game modes, so there's nothing, no training, no single event. You know, this was the mid-80s, so not even the conversion, we didn't get any of that. You get one single gameplay mode, and that's it. So even though news are understandably scarce, my guess is that no one in the arcades took a second glance at Hunchback at the Olympics. But since the character went on to somehow enjoy 2 more exclusive titles for the home computer market, I would guess that someone at Century Electronics was betting on our dear old Quasimodo to be a hit with the kids. A mascot, if you will. A mascot for what? Correct posture? Anyway, Century Electronics evidently decided that this 1984 sports arcade title absolutely needed a Commodore 64 and MSX conversion, and this was handled by Colin Porch, who will then go on to work on other more famous 8-bit ports like Operation Wolf and Contra, and graphics by Tom Lanigan. In a short review I wrote when I was 17 years old, I commented, "The game is fun, but can get frustrating." I honestly shudder to think about what my idea of fun was when I was 17 years old. Anyway, it's easy to imagine Colin looking at the original arcade game and thinking, "Oh god, why?" At least that's the way I try to explain his attempt to add a tiny bit of off-the-wall fun to this port. Indeed, the conversion has a pretty exciting new feature, probably the one exciting thing about the whole package, that does add even more head-scratching weirdness to the whole it's an Hunchback at the Olympics package. Hunchback at the Olympics on the Commodore 64 is probably one of the first games ever to feature a punishment system. Indeed, each time the player fails an event or Quasimodo gets a false start, he will be punished accordingly. These punishments are shown by a series of weird animated cutscenes with a clearly different art style from the rest of the game, where the Hunchback, who honestly seems to be standing fairly straight, good for him, gets in all kinds of trouble. They play more like humorous little cutscenes than violent punishments, but you get the idea. So Hunchback gets rained on by passing clouds, then he gets electrocuted, then a phone explodes in his hands, turning him to a pile of dust, I think, and then a bell falls on his head and he basically disappears. To top it all off, he gets pissed on by a toilet while trying to avoid toilet paper falling from the sky. Since this seems to still be medieval times, it's anyone's guess as to why this vignettes feature a toilet paper or a dial phone, but yeah. It's understandable. I mean, it's not like medieval times are famous for torture devices, so you had to make something up, I guess. In these cutscenes, Esmeralda looks like the blue fairy from Pinocchio dressed in a pink dot costume, and I love the way she lovingly calls the Hunchback, "It's for you!" Like she already knows what's going to happen. The wench. I would say Colin knew the audience he was catering to, or at least that's my personal way of explaining the reason why he made 4 different punishments, but only one reward screen, where the pink fairy kisses Quasimodo on the cheek. As weird as it might sound, I know, no one seemed to care about the narrative of Hunchback at the Olympics making any kind of sense, and Zap responded in kind, awarding the game a rather harsh, but fair, 23% rating, saying, "Certainly should have an XX rating just for the mental effects of sitting through the funny screens a few times." For what it's worth though, Colin made a pretty faithful conversions. Graphics are standard, but they work, sound is basic, gameplay repetitive enough for what will last most players 5 minutes. I mean, it's definitely faithful to the original, which is not a good thing in this case, but it is interesting to think about the duality of punishment in Hunchback at the Olympics. Playing it is not really what I would define entertaining, and might be considered by most players, especially today, to be already a punishment in itself. Adding mental torture to the physical extortion of having to waggle a joystick to get a character to run and get to the finish line before the times run out, only to see him fail for no obvious reason, because the controls are kinda weird. So yeah, playing already feels like a punishment, so it's possible to see an attempt, a meta commentary in the cutscenes, which might make sense with the fact that they take place in modern times. Not only the player is getting punished by playing Hunchback at the Olympics, but the main character is also put through hell. You know, just because he did participate in your punishments, so he needs to be punished as well. Okay, maybe I'm thinking too much about this. But I mean, you must know where I'm coming from. Hunchback at the Olympics is one of the first games I remember playing in my life, and that says a lot about me and my experience with gaming. Frankly, I just played to see if there were more punishment. I was not interested in seeing Quasimodo being kissed. I wanted to see him being punished, and I guess that says a lot about me. Is this turning into a video examining how bad game design turned me into a sadist or glutton for punishment? Okay, anyway, my version, of course, me being from Italy, was a pirated one. And speaking of pirates, the Italian pirates distributed Hunchback at the Olympics under various titles, or yeah, pretty standard, but the one exception was Agasoft, and they came from Naples, and they distribute the game under the name Hunchback Sex Game. Now, I can be 100% sure that they didn't add something to it, because I couldn't find this original pirated version, but I don't think they would bother, honestly. I'm pretty sure that name was just a last-ditch attempt to make this sound more appealing than it was. What a weird choice, out of all the games on the Commodore 64 to try to add porn to Hunchback at the Olympics, where it already had punishments. I mean, you could have just sold the punishments, I guess, maybe it would have made sense. At the end, let's give it up for Colin. At least he tried to inject some bits of entertainment into a rather forgettable arcade title port. Imagine Outrun having punishment cutscenes with the blonde girl torturing the guy by forcing him to pedal around on a bike, or Hikari Warriors where the player is forced to play the US version of the game. Still, even in our present time, with so many weird and strange games around, it's not easy to think of another title where the main character gets electrocuted, turned to ashes, crushed by a bell, and pissed on. If 40 years down the line this is not one of the greatest achievements for a video game, well, I don't know what else to call it.